Welcome in everyone. Today I have an absolute rip and roar, like no joke. This video is going to be about how I worked with one of the most interesting people I've ever met. But hey, before we get into it, please make sure you drop a follow and a like if you stick around and watch the whole video. Love to have you around, but hey, if not, that's alright too. But without further ado, let's get into it. So this is back when I worked in a lab and I was about 27, 28. And oh, before you think, oh, dude, were you like some kind of biochemical engineer? Nah, dude, nah. It was actually a factory, and I was just working as a packer at the time. Got promoted up to a machine operator. During this time, there are a lot of interesting characters that pass through this place. One day, we get a batch of hires in, and there's this guy with the crispest white jean pants and white tee. He's an older guy, maybe in his late 40s, early 50s. We're going to call him Teddy. So after a few days go by, I'm working with him in my room, looking over all the equipment and everything, running smoothly while Teddy and everybody else is working on the line. So I introduce myself, start chatting with Teddy, and he tells me, like, yeah, man, I've lived here for a few years. I'm originally from Chicago, but, I've just kind of been, like, kicking it here, living kind of slow. We start kind of getting more into it since everything's running steady, and he tells me he spent, like, a lot of his time in Chicago in a gang. So I'm like, oh shit, dude, this place is super boring and I'm working. I'm like, that's fucking interesting. What's up with that? He then tells me that he was with the Satan's Disciples at the time. And I felt like I had heard about them in maybe like a YouTube doc or like maybe like Gangland or something like that. So we kind of chat a little bit, but I didn't get too much into it. Now, after we had this conversation, I decided to go home that night after work and do a little research. I found out that the gang had started maybe around the 50s, 60s, and grew significantly bigger and stronger around the 70s. This was around the time Teddy said that he was active. So, another day of work kind of rolls around, and me and Teddy are working in a room together again. I started trying to get Teddy in the rooms I was operating in because, hey, he was an interesting chat and he was an incredible worker, which, will make a little more sense down the road. But also, it made my job easier having somebody competent that could, handle their work, right? Well, I'm chopping it up with Teddy, and I asked him, like, hey, how did you make, your hustle? How did you make most of your living, like, in your gang shit, bro? He tells me, sticking up dope man for money. And I was like, oh shit, bro, do you have any crazy stories? And honestly, I'm obsessed with that socially deviant behavior, like crime stuff. I went to school, like, studying sociology, psychology, all that shit. And just because I'm interested in it, like, my deviance class was one of my favorite classes, and it's actually one of the hardest classes I took in college, but I had a dope professor, and I really learned a lot in that class, so what he's talking about is just right up my alley. So he goes on to tell me, as a matter of fact, the situation that got me locked up for 8 years was pretty wild. And I'm like, oh shit, dude. So Teddy starts getting into it. He says, so there's this guy selling mountains of blow. And he's like, well, me and another guy I was going to break a piece off with, we were kind of watching his place for 3 or 4 days. And he's like, we did business with him, but, at this point we had cut it off and we are just kind of watching out for him. So they're like casing out his place for like 5 to 8 hours or something like that a day, he was telling me. He said he learned the schedule. They said they didn't like this guy, or he didn't like this guy in particular because his dad was like a chief or a sergeant, or he was like a police officer, like a ranking police officer. And because of this, he could kind of, I guess, maybe pull the wool over his dad's eyes, or hey, maybe this was back then. Maybe his dad was working with him. Who knows? But either way, Teddy didn't like the way that he kind of carried himself around. He was like very disrespectful, is like what he was telling me. So he tells me, yep, one day we catch him on one of those days he could possibly re-up. We see the car pull up. That was an indicator that he had just picked up and got served by his main plug. He's like, so, we sit there and wait till the night, early morning. And Teddy's like, I just walk up to the door, knock on it. Guy comes up, opens the front door. Ted then says he's not wasting no time whatsoever, cracks him in the jaw hard. Like he's like, I shattered that thing with a sawed-off shotgun. I'm like, yo. He then says he drags the dude upstairs, realizes his girlfriend's up there at the time and didn't know she was there, I guess, but he ends up zip tying both of them, then grabs the guy and drags him into another room. Then Teddy proceeds to go back outside, open up his trunk, get a gas can, go back inside, then douse this guy. I don't know if he said it was kerosene or gasoline, but he douses him with a flammable liquid and then steps back, has a book of matches in his hand. He's like, if you don't tell me where the dope And the money is, he's like, you're going up in fucking flames in this house. Now, I know this seems wild, and you may be thinking, oh, come on, Bam. There ain't no way this guy's serious. He's probably lying about all this to still, sound interesting. Well, let me tell you, shortly after the first week or so I had met this guy, he was taking off his jacket, dude. And if you know, like, the Satan disciples, it's like a baby devil. Like, it's a very distinct style of, like, of character. And he had this tattooed on his arm, and trust me, it looked like a gang tattoo from the 70s. Like, no doubt about it. But anyway, back to his story. So he said after he hit this fucking devious ass lick, he got $25,000 and he got a good amount of blow. Teddy goes on to say that the guy ended up going to the police station after it was over, and then told them that he was held at gunpoint, then beat up and robbed outside of a bar. And it was also known, I guess, that Ted was kind of gang affiliated, right? And this probably didn't help the fact that the dude's dad was a ranking police officer. Teddy said, though, he's like, man, when I heard him lie about all that shit and I already kind of hated the guy, he's like, I couldn't help it, man. He's like, I blew up in court on that guy. I told him how big of a piece of shit of a dealer he was and how he's just got daddy protecting him. And he said, there was really, like, it's understandable why the judge threw the book at me and pretty much hit me with anything he could stick me with. Now, Teddy is obviously an interesting guy to chat with, but I remember we had a new batch of temp hires come in. And this group, there's a guy named Daniel, and this guy was just goofy and just really fucking annoying, man. The other thing about this guy is that he was one of the worst workers to step into the place. So if you worked with him, there's like a good chance you're going to be doing two people's job. Like, he's just completely useless. Well, one day he does this while he's on the line with Teddy, and Teddy starts getting pissed because he's having to cap these jars of cream like really fast, and Daniel's just really not doing anything. He's going super slow. And just a bit of information, Ted was a little bit of a clean freak, and Daniel happened to have extreme eczema like all over his body. And hey, I'm not making fun of him or anything by any means, but Daniel would do something just very unacceptable from time to time that was kind of fucking unhygienic, even or not if he had a skin condition. So anytime we went into the rooms of work, we had to wear, hairnet, gloves, button-up gowns to prevent contamination of the products. I mean, we were technically a lab and we produced large amounts of like topical creams and medications, but at least one time, this time I saw, Daniel took off his beard net and then began rubbing his face with his gloves on. I mean, like scrubbing his face with the gloves. This wasn't like a quick itching a scratch. This guy's trying to sandpaper his face with the gloves for like a solid 45 seconds. He didn't even replace his gloves and continued working, and everybody's like, what the hell? Well, after this and making Teddy do a majority of the work, Teddy just gets real pissed. A few minutes later, break time rolls by and Teddy storms out, sees me, and he's like, yo, did you see Daniel rubbing his skin flakes all over the fucking place? Like, what the hell? That's great. Why are we even wearing this protective stuff to stop contamination if he's doing shit like that? And, Teddy had a point. I was like, hey, man, you might want to just let his team lead know or some shit like that, right? Dude, Teddy doesn't even hear me at this point, and he just also is mad because he informs me, he's like, yo, dude, I'm having to do this work, and this dude is literally nodding off, falling asleep where I'm have to pick up his slack. Yo, then Teddy starts to get in his old ways. He starts to tap into that OG energy, and he goes, yo, I am not going to be getting paid only my wage for working two people's job, right? If Daniel doesn't stop fucking around come payday, I might have to start following him around to see where he banks to fucking get mine. I'm like, whoa, dude. I get this guy's a fucking goofball, but he's not worth it, Teddy. Dude, Daniel didn't realize he almost had an OG ready to roll on him. And sometime before all this, I had found out Teddy really couldn't read. And I'm no means making fun of him, but this was after he was trying to get put on as machine operator like me. And at some point through this, he had caused a few hiccups that were pretty bad. I did a lot of the technical stuff, like setting up the computers to run the batches and everything like that. And how I found out was sometime around here, he was asking maybe about a temp service that was common in this workplace. And when I gave him the name and to write it down, the word was like, it had the word work in it somewhere, right? And I watched him write down how he was going to spell the word work, and he spelled it Weorke. And I was like, oh, like, when I first met him, he's like, I can't read too good. And when he kind of said that, it meant like he's not a big reader, like he doesn't like to read. That's how I took it. I even considered asking him if he, wanted reading lessons, but I really thought about it and I didn't want to offer something like that because I was working so much at the time, I wouldn't want to offer a service that, I couldn't really help him out for because, he's probably vulnerable about it, but he was genuinely a competent dude. But honestly, this little fact helped me verify or understand his gang affiliation. It made a lot more sense. I mean, look at Sammy the Bull. Sammy Gravano, like one of the root causes he got into organized crime was because he was dyslexic. And back then, no one paid attention to what the hell dyslexia was. Like, so if you're shitty in school back then, didn't have any extra support or resources, like what do you do when you have willpower and determination to do something? And you don't have anything, you'll find something that'll work for you. Especially in larger cities like Chicago, where organized crime's a little more ease of access. Teddy dropped out of school at a young age and was working construction when he was probably like a teenager, rolling with the Satan's disciples sometime soon after that. But, sometime later, I think Teddy quit or maybe he was let go. I can't really remember, but man, I will never forget this guy. Honestly, if he could have written a book, I felt like it would have just been an incredible read, man. Like, the guy was so interesting. Satan's disciples, if you look into the gang, or I don't know if this is how it goes now, I'm not sure, but the time that he was said he was mainly active, it was very common for them to be entrepreneurs, like, and to have like even regular day jobs, right? Have regular day jobs and do your gang shit on the side. And he did that. He was like, I was making great money before, and I was making even better money with the sticking up the dope men and all that, right? Hey, if you stayed to the end, I really appreciate you. Drop that like, drop that follow, and stick around for some more story times. Till next time, take it easy, gamers.